Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And today we're continuing our conversation on ESG, environment, social, and governance. But today we're exploring the challenges and opportunities for brands. And I'm thrilled that we are able to, you're able to join us for this exploration. While the promise of being eco-friendly, environmentally sustainable, earth-friendly, socially equitable, organic, etc., are increasingly being used by several brands, staying true to this promise can be a really difficult task. So joining us today to help us understand and navigate this is a fabulous panel of executive practitioners, two of whom happen to be Emory alumni, and moderated by Goizueta faculty member Saloni Vastani. Saloni is an associate professor in the practice of marketing, and following an extensive career in leadership roles in Fortune 100 companies, Saloni pursued her doctorate and directed her focus to business strategy, pricing strategy, and innovation management, with a very keen interest in how brands are integrating ESG to create value, and that's what inspired today's conversation. Joining Saloni are Kim Burns, VP and General Manager at Georgia Pacific, Pete Davis, co-founder and CEO of GreenPrint, and Ashley Grice, CEO of Brighthouse, which is a VCG company. So let me just give you a brief overview of their bios. Kim Burns is a seasoned consumer products leader focused on strategy, insights, and innovation in the CPG industry. She's currently VP and GM of Georgia Pacific's retail towel and napkin business, managing brands like Brawny Towel and Vanity Fair Napkin. She's held a variety of roles at Georgia Pacific, including pricing strategy and consumer knowledge and analytics. And she previously consulted for CPG and industrial companies at Bain & Company. She graduated with an engineering degree from Georgia Institute of Technology. My sons are hoping to do the same. And also an MBA from Harvard Business School. So welcome, Kim. Pete Davis is one of our alumni, received his MBA from Goizueta, and spent his early career with P&G before co-founding Cartera Commerce, which operated loyalty programs for large airlines, banks, and retailers. And while working with a client, he saw an opportunity to help companies build loyalty and attract purpose-driven consumers by investing in sustainability and addressing their environmental impact. And this led Pete to start GreenPrint, which offers greenhouse gas inventory and tracking, carbon offsetting, sustainability consulting, and related services. And today, GreenPrint operates in 16 countries and has helped over 30,000 companies implement sustainability plans and offset over 10 million tons of carbon. So welcome, Pete, and thank you. Last but certainly not least, Ashley Grice, also a Goizueta MBA alum, has devoted the lion's share of her energy and professional career inspiring others to lead with purpose. As Ashley shared in the recent podcast, purpose, sustainability, and social impact are all naturally connected. Businesses are ultimately serving some kind of human need, and understanding how each business does this authentically is the connection between these three elements. Ashley's career began in public health, followed by roles at Meredith Accelerated Marketing and Iris Worldwide, and Ashley is now the CEO of Brighthouse. And interestingly, her recent client engagements have focused on excavating the purpose of a leading Australian financial institution, aligning the purpose and strategic agenda for a large real estate development firm in China, and shaping the integration of purpose, culture, change, and strategic intent for a large technology company. Suffice to say, our panelists bring many interesting and diverse perspectives to creating, building, and sustaining an authentic ESG-focused brand. And we're very grateful to have you all with us today. Saloni is going to lead us through a conversation with our guests, and then we will transition to the open Q&A. So as always, please put your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can today. And at the end of today's session, there'll be a very short survey, 1 or 2 questions in terms of your key takeaways. So really appreciate it if you would share those with us. And we look forward to capping off the ESG series next session on December 16th, where we're going to explore a new growth segment of B Corps. Saloni, over to you, and thank you so much to our panelists.
Thank you, Nicola, for getting us started this morning. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here Thursday morning, talking to these fabulous people on the panel today. I want to, at the outset, thank everyone who has helped us in organizing this. So many people working in the background, Pam, Justin, Courtney, that has made this happen today. So thank you, all of them and all of you for being here today. I want to start off by saying that our topic today explores the challenges and promises of creating an eco-friendly brand, one that not only consumers like, but also love. A recent survey said that half of the Americans see themselves as environmentally conscious, and 7 out of 10 Americans want the companies to represent the values of sustainability and have some sort of sustainability initiative in place. However, only 17%, 17% of the consumers currently purchase sustainable products. This number is steadily growing, and we all have our part in accelerating this change. So I have this panel, fantastic panel here to share with us some of the best practices of doing that. What are they doing in their companies, in their lives to make this happen for all of us and the planet? So with that, I'd like to get started. Ashley, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about what you do and why you love what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I basically lead BCG Brighthouse, and the focus of our organization is to help companies excavate the purpose that lives within their organization, coming from their ethos, marry to their future aspiration, and then think about how do you roll that out in the company across a lot of strategic imperatives, things like ESG or DEI, ethical AI, talent acquisition and retention. And so my whole job is focused on helping companies really understand the role that they play in the world and how to execute that across the organization.
Fantastic, thank you. So my first question for you, Ashley, is I was recently flying Delta, and they have had a carbon neutral pledge, and it's kind of how do you reconcile that with sustainability, because it's an airline, they burn so much fuel, and to be sustainable, we would say, hey, stop flying. So those are kind of contradictory messages, and how do you reconcile those two ideas as a manager, as a company, to satisfy your purpose as well as do the right thing for the environment?
Yeah. So first off, speaking of brands we love, Delta, I have much love for Delta. So shout out there. I am also certain that Pete will have comments on this later, but the way that I would approach it is to say that getting to sustainability is a journey, right? We all have to start at some point in that journey and have an end goal in mind. And it doesn't mean that you can flip the switch in terms of what your business does and become wholly sustainable in certain ways. That's just not how the economics are going to work or how it serves consumers' needs in the best way. But what you do need to understand is, where do you authentically play in the sustainability landscape, which is where purpose comes in. The question, I get it all the time, can you activate sustainability efforts without purpose? Of course you can, but you can do them more authentically. You can do them more effectively if you have a very clear intention of the kind of value that you want to create. So when we're talking about how do you bring together this, this aspiration for the future, as well as the business that you have today, it's thinking about how do we redefine success for this company? What does it mean to its various multi-stakeholders? And what's the journey that we're going to take to get there? And then set yourself targets that are reasonable and thoughtful, but also a little bit audacious, to make sure that you're moving down that journey so that you can balance the question that you are asking and that, frankly, consumers are asking worldwide.
Fantastic. So as companies are trying to do this, Ashley, and they're trying to do this right thing about having a purpose and, bringing in sustainability goals, I've heard a lot of complaints about how expensive it is to do that, right? How costly it is for companies to be implementing these changes. Can you help people here on this call think about a good business case? How would you how would they reconcile those two aspects?
Yeah. I think, let's be honest up front, oftentimes it is expensive because it takes investment. It's not always dollars, but it is time and treasure and talent of the company. So if you're thinking about the cost of something up front, you have to think about all those different aspects. However, if you have that end journey in mind, right, the idea that you can get to the right level of marketing and pricing and balance, getting the kinds of pieces that you're offering to consumers, the products in that right space to continue, to make an appropriate profit to build your business, that's very possible. You just have to look at how you're doing it and redefining success. So, one of my favorite examples is the company CVS, right, has a purpose on path to better health. I'm sure you all have read about this, but in the news, it said when CVS took tobacco out of their stores, right, in the short term, it took a $2 billion hit because of tobacco sales. I would argue the hit was probably much higher because you have tobacco sales, but you also have ancillary sales, things like candy that were at the front, things that people buy impulse purchases. Not only did CVS remove tobacco in light of their purpose of the path towards better health, they actually rearranged the inside of their stores in terms of how people flowed through. So things like candy went to the back, so that they had to think about, if we're a healthcare company and we want to be a healthcare company, what are the things that we want to put that consumer sees first based on consumer shopping behaviors? So they did that. Was it a hit? Yes. Was it ultimately a great deal for them long term? Yes. And their executives will tell you that. Why? Because actually converting themselves into a healthcare company through their purpose made them attractive for the merger of Aetna and CVS. And they will tell you that they wouldn't have been considered for something like that if they were not a healthcare company. So short-term investment, long-term gain, and their position in the market and where they've been with that merger and beyond could tell you things about that as well. So is there investment? Of course there is. But is there a road at the end in terms of where you can also get extra value? Absolutely.
Fantastic. That was a really good example of how the doing the right thing sort of pays off, right, in the end. That's a good time right around Christmas. Kim, let's move on to you. Can you share a little bit with the audience about your role at Georgia-Pacific and what you are responsible for?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So I lead our retail towel and napkin business at Georgia-Pacific. So Georgia-Pacific makes a variety of wood and fiber related products. My business segment, consumer products, makes a lot of paper products that you might be familiar with. And we do it for the away from home market or commercial market, as well as at home. So think of paper towels that you would use in a restaurant bathroom, or the paper towels or toilet paper that you buy for your own home. So I work on the retail side. So that's the consumer products that you might buy at a grocery store. And again, my focus is on towels and napkins. So brands Brawny, Sparkle, and Vanity Fair. And we also make some customer brand or private labels as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. And I know we were talking a couple of years ago when you took on this new position and you were wondering how to incorporate, what we need to do for the environment, and you made it happen.
Slowly.
Yeah, slowly, and that's, what we need to do. So you've been this fearless leader sort of taking on these challenges of introducing products for consumers. Can you share a little bit about what your journey looked like since we first talked to now?
Yeah. So like Ashley said, and you just said it is a journey, and we are still at the beginning of our journey. But probably the first thing we learned is that our approach can't be one size fits all. So today we have a family of brands. I mentioned some of the brands that I specifically manage, and each of them has a different benefit, different target consumer, right, that we go after. So we have the opportunity to add sustainability benefits to our brands, but it really needs to be consistent with each brand's image and equity. So really being authentic to the purpose, like Ashley was saying. So real life example that you and I have worked on is our Brawny paper towel brand. So Brawny, I mean, it's in the name, it stands for strength and toughness. So that's what our consumers give us credit for. That's what our consumers expect. So in trying to add any sustainability benefit to Brawny, we need to make sure that we still deliver on that consumer expectation of strength and toughness. So for example, we need to be really careful that we don't sacrifice the actual performance of the product in an effort to make it more sustainable. So to do that, and to help us figure out what is and is not a good fit for each brand, we go through a process of consumer research, both qualitative and quantitative, to understand what makes sense for each brand, if anything. And each brand might have a different approach. And then once we identify that fit, then we focus on rapid experimentation. So what will work in terms of the technical product solution, but then also packaging, the distribution, the pricing, and how we message that new benefit to the consumer in the most effective way.
Fantastic. As you talk about messaging, right? And you're right on the front lines on the CPG side. And there have been so many claims about greenwashing. And you're trying to do the right thing sometimes, but there are some bad apples that have led with messaging before leading with action. And how can you, what best practices can you share with the audience about how to be careful around these claims and the messaging aspect of launching a product?
Yeah, you're right. You need to be very careful and thoughtful, and good intention is unfortunately not enough. So we have learned that many of the phrases that marketers use in discussing environmental benefits are heavily scrutinized by state regulators as well as the FTC. So even the term in this webinar, eco-friendly, that would, if we tried to put that on a product, that would definitely draw FTC scrutiny. So we work very closely with our legal team to make sure that any environmental claim we make is first substantiated, second, compliant with federal and state regulations. And the thing that helps us do that the best is to consider how the consumer may interpret the claim or message you're making, regardless of your intent. So thinking through that lens of how could somebody interpret this, or and again, like the decision making, especially in my category of fast moving consumer goods, people are making decisions at the shelf in a matter of seconds. So it's like if somebody walks by and sees this message in a second on a package, what will they take away? Without really thinking about it, without reading the fine print, what is that perception by the consumer? And is that clear, transparent, substantiated, compliant? And to do that, put that lens on it of what could somebody perceive, that can help you think through how to refine things, how to mitigate some of those risks. The last thing that we also do is we have a corporate stewardship framework that helps us have transparency with our external stakeholders. So whether that be government agencies and regulators, it could be suppliers and customers, all of those things, but it gives us a framework to have that transparent conversation with our stakeholders around our priorities and focus areas. And it also it helps keep us grounded in that intent of what we're trying to do.
Very cool. That was some really good tips. Thanks for that, Kim. Pete, I would love for you to add to this conversation on greenwashing. But before we jump into that, could you share with the audience a little bit about your company and what wakes you up in the morning and brings you to work?
Sure. Thanks for having me. GreenPrint, we're a sustainability service provider. We work with companies kind of in the B2B space, and also kind of a heavy focus on B2C companies that are on the B2B side, kind of implementing sustainability plans for stakeholders that might be investors or clients through the supply chain, shareholders, that sort of thing. On the B2C side, we as you mentioned earlier, I think in the introduction, take a heavy focus on working with companies that are consumer facing, that have a kind of consumer brand and want to build loyalty through purpose-driven efforts, and kind of tap into that halo effect by addressing sustainability, some kind of unmet needs out there in the marketplace. When I think about those two segments, kind of back to the earlier conversation, some of the things that Ashley and Kim both mentioned, they're really two different sets of stakeholders. Implementing ESG from a corporate perspective is really, in many respects, like a compliance obligation, right? So whether it's a government agency that you're reporting to, or an industry regulation, or filling out a vendor questionnaire through the supply chain, there's a whole movement related to kind of measuring greenhouse gas emissions, setting targets, making commitments to get to net zero, et cetera, that are really done on more of an annual basis, and they're kind of a compliance corporate obligation. And then there's a whole separate set of stakeholders, largely consumers, if you're selling a consumer product or service, that, the sustainability efforts there are really voluntary. As you mentioned, 17%, a relatively low percentage of consumers are kind of going out of their way to purchase sustainable products and pay more. And so it's really a corporate decision for a company to decide to get into the business of going above and beyond from a voluntary perspective, to measure and try to analyze the consumers that they serve, what segment it is, and what the material impacts of their product are related to serving those consumers. And so we spend a lot of time working with companies trying to figure out, how to address that, how to be authentic, and address kind of sustainability kind of targets and measures related to specific products and services.
So that's great. Thank you for that. So is there like a good calculator or a resource that people can go to calculate the right amount of offset, or will they need to call you? Like, also, if you could add to that, we hear all these terms about carbon neutral, net zero. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think, so we do a lot with carbon offsetting. I think there are a number of calculators out there. Honestly, a lot of kind of greenhouse gas inventory calculations are kind of bespoke calculations because they're unique to the industry, whether it's a product level calculation or a corporate wide calculation. So that I can't point you to a off the shelf calculator. Although some of the corporate reporting frameworks, GRI and CDP, have questionnaires that kind of walk you through a number of those things. I think specific to carbon offsetting, carbon offsetting is a great tool to, help the first mile or last mile in a sustainability plan. It's not the end game, but it's really a great mechanism to augment an existing plan. And so, we try to make kind of sustainability convenient for our clients. And I think Ashley mentioned, every company we work with is at a different phase of their sustainability journey. It's a relatively kind of new space, and some are really sophisticated and have kind of big teams against this, and some are just starting off and honestly don't even know what the acronym ESG stands for. And so we try to work with companies at any stage of that continuum and make it kind of easy and convenient for them. And offsetting is part of the plan. So it's great to start with if you want to make a pledge. Also, if you have a pledge and you need to hit a certain milestone, you want to get to 100% carbon neutral or net zero, being able to invest in carbon offsets to sequester carbon to help you meet your internal goals are fantastic, is a fantastic tool, only to really augment other mechanisms that you might have. So sustainable sourcing, investing in renewable energy, other tactics that are really the kind of crux to the solution.
Fantastic. So at least you can neutralize your impact on the environment that you're making. And in the process of getting to a fully sustainable solution, this is a great measure to take. Do you see any differences in sustainable practices, or our audience should be thinking about if they are a B2C company versus a B2B company?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is there are different stakeholders that you're appealing to. So, largely B2B companies are doing something, reporting because shareholders, investors, lenders, or customers they serve, corporate customers, are asking them. And so it's a little bit more of an obligation. The ROI is a little bit easier to justify because you kind of have to do it for people that are asking. And the reporting is typically a defined framework. So you report to, one of 5 or so existing frameworks that are out there: SASB, TCFD, the Carbon Disclosure Project, et cetera. And they tend to be more annual reporting on a specific kind of time frame. And then B2C companies often have to deal with those same obligations, but then separately on a more voluntary basis, if they feel like they want to be a purpose-driven brand and tap into that kind of loyalty and change behavior that consumers are demanding more often now. They then have to analyze, as Kim mentioned, who their target customer is, what aspects of sustainability are material to that new stakeholder group, the customers, and then what they can do authentically to kind of meet the demand of those customers. And then in addition to that kind of new set of potential sustainability components, there's a whole new set of communications and positioning and branding and marketing that comes with engaging consumers versus more of the corporate stakeholders. And it's more of an ongoing process versus, more of an annual process on the corporate side.
Thank you for sharing that. So it looks like it's the right thing to do, but it's a little more work if you're a B2C company than you're a B2B company to make these implementations happen. And we talked a little bit about greenwashing earlier and how most likely B2C companies have to be more wary of those aspects. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a green premium. And for those of you that have not heard the term, we have greenwashing, which is sharing misleading information about sustainability practices about a company. Green premium usually refers to charging extra for sustainable products. And that's what we see in the market right now. Usually, environmentally sustainable products are 20 to 30% more expensive, partially because it's expensive to, innovate in that and set the company processes. So the company is, sharing these costs with the consumer. Ashley, I want to ask you about how companies can balance between these brands and consumers, and how do you balance this green premium that exists in the marketplace, and how should companies be thinking about it in different stages of their journey?
Sure. So I think, in the beginning stages, right, what Kim was talking about earlier, the very careful analysis that she's doing on each of these pieces are going to be the fundamental backbone of how you get that pricing to be what it needs to be. At the same time, there is an element of storytelling to every stakeholder you have, very clearly and with conviction, what you're doing and why, right? Talking about that journey, talking about the elements that you're trying to achieve, because that's one of the value exchanges that consumers who are looking for this kind of product want to engage with, right? So part of it is going to be segmentation. To whom am I speaking? To whom am I ultimately going to sell this? Because there's a certain subset who will be first movers, and then there are people who are going to be the followers, but you have to be thoughtful about, how do I get the first movers? So if you think about companies who have done this well, like there was a reason that all of us ages ago called it Whole Paycheck instead of Whole Foods. It's an expensive place, but they did a really good job being a first mover by saying, by the way, this is important and you're going to pay for it. And people still do, right? So I'm not glossing over the fact that there was massive amount of analytics that went behind that. But if you think about like that first mover and storytelling premium, the ability to create cachet around, this is actually good for us and for our future, I would argue that Whole Foods, when they went into it, did a really good job. Another company that does a really good job, which is very purpose-driven, is Mercedes-Benz. And so when Mercedes thinks about ESG, which Pete, you made such a poignant piece that I want to make sure we touch on, that a lot of people don't really differentiate between ESG and climate or environment, and they are different, right? There's E, S, and G. And so when Mercedes was thinking about the E aspect of that, they did a lot of excavation into their purpose and looked at, wow, we're really good at innovation, right? This has been the history. It's the ethos of who we are. They put the first car on the road. They had the first woman drive it, by the way, because it was Bertha, not Carl's Benz, who had the, strength to drive that cross country and get out and crank it, right? So they had a lot of firsts there, a lot of firsts of innovation, but they also came to depths with saying, we were also first to pollute the planet in that way. So what do we owe to society back for that? So their purpose is first to move the world. The concept of how do we think about innovation within the broader scope of public health, and some of the bold commitments on the E journey of ESG that came out of that were carbon neutral plants in Germany 2022, right? Very specific carbon goals by 2039. They put it down on paper, and people pay a premium for a Mercedes-Benz, but they've told the story about the fact that they've got that purpose-driven innovation is who they are, that they're going to do this really well and be able to lead part of the market in that way, which I think is critical, right? And if you look at them versus like a Tesla, thinking about how they're looking at the market and how they're positioning themselves, it's an interesting story to watch. So that storytelling aspect of it, with a clear underpinning of all the really analytical work that we've touched on, right? You can't do it without that. But that storytelling piece is important to get people to be thoughtful about, why will I pay that premium and to whom should I be selling that product?
That's a really
chime in.
Yeah, jump in.
Comment. I think those are great points, Ashley. I would say that there's another interesting way to measure the price premium, right? So Whole Foods attracted a certain segment of customers that wanted organic foods and sustainable sourcing, and were willing to drive to a Whole Foods, maybe go out of their way a little bit and pay more.
Yeah.
I think that in addition to the willingness to pay more, consumers kind of quote pay by changing their behavior. And so I think if you look at volume now, and Kim, I'm sure you have the numbers, I think Walmart actually sells more organic foods than Whole Foods does. Yeah. Because it's easy, right? People are already going to Walmart. They're, right in the front center aisle, easy to pick up organic foods, and they're really priced right. And so I think one of the ways to benefit from consumers is not necessarily charging more, it's measuring the qualitative things like increased loyalty, increased net promoter score, all the things that you really want from a customer. Maybe it's less price sensitivity or the ability for them to pay, charge them a higher price, but really more of their business, more of their mind share, them referring your product to their friends and family, et cetera. And so we spend a lot of time helping our clients and brands measure that impact, because that's really where the gold is in the value, kind of across any segment. You think about cars, right? Tesla, great product. Only a certain amount of people are going to buy a really expensive Tesla and go out of their way and pay more and have the ability to do that. I think Ford has the F-150 Lightning that's in development coming out soon, which could be a total game changer, right? It could be a better product. It's the #1 selling vehicle every year, kind of year over year. And so if they can deliver like a faster car that's quiet, that has better torque, that has a built-in generator for contractors on the job, on their job sites, and price it right, it's that sort of thing that makes sustainability convenient for consumers, and they don't have to incur trade-offs. They can do the right thing and be sustainable, get a better product that has sustainability built into it.
Well, and I love, I'm sorry. Ooh, sorry, Pete.
No, okay.
I was saying, what I love about what you're saying is it's a concept I talk to companies about a lot when we talk about sustainability, right? This is not a competition in all ways, right? It is a cooperation, which is why I think that the purpose piece of coming down into defining ESG is so important, because certain companies will do certain things really well. Like they have a specific role in the world. So Whole Foods plays a role and Walmart plays a role. And if they're thoughtful about how they play that role in sustainability really authentically, they can both exist in their space, do the quote unquote right things, which, I saw that question in the chat about what that means. And the right thing is different for every company based on who you are, the role you play, and where you can afford to invest. But if they do that well and think about it as a kind of my public health beneficial externality you got to all work together to kind of raise the fabric. That is where you see some of that working really, really well. So the Walmart Whole Foods example is a perfect example, right? Maybe Whole Foods got people talking about it. Maybe they had the story about it, but Walmart is executing on that story in a way that brings that to so many other consumers that otherwise wouldn't have access to it. So those two things working together is a beautiful cooperative that, for me, that's the hope on sustainability that I have, that you will see that across cooperative fabrics within certain industries, because that's where I think we can really, move the needle on things.
And I was just going to say, and I saw Kim shaking her head. I think another great example is like some of Georgia Pacific's products, like Quilted Northern, same great product, same great price, available everywhere. And, they plant 3 trees for every one used, and there's 30% less energy used and 30% less water used. Is basically a great example of making sustainability easy for customers and not charging a price premium per se.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said, Pete, really resonated with me, that it's not just the dollar price premium that we find as an impediment to changing consumer behavior. Actually, the first barrier is behavior change. So if you're asking consumers to change their behavior, especially, and again, my categories are just like so habitual, like routine parts of our life that people can't really fathom going without them or materially changing their behavior for them. That's the first barrier that we have to break through. And then if you tack on charging a price premium on top of that, we find you're kind of dead in the water in terms of really converting consumers beyond that very first like early adopter segment that Ashley talked about. So we think about those trade-offs. We make paper products that are meant to be disposable. Like that's the core benefit of our product. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make sense for us, likely, I think in the near term, maybe long term, for us to try to move consumers, for example, to replace their Brawny paper towels with a reusable microfiber cloth. It's just too big of a behavior change for consumers to fathom. So they value the disposability and the convenience of a disposable paper towel. So how can we make a disposable paper towel better for the environment? And that's where a lot of our focus is on, and what kind of trade-offs we can get consumers to make. So I'll give you a tangible example. Our products, and most of the products in the industry, are wrapped in thin plastic, right? That's how they're packaged. Most of that is not recyclable curbside because it gets wrapped up in the manufacturing, the recycling facilities. So we don't really have scale infrastructure to recycle that. So we went through the process of making that packaging store drop-off recyclable. So I don't know if any of you do that today, but you can kind of keep your plastic packaging with maybe those plastic grocery bags that you get sometimes, and you can take them back to the grocery store, and they have drop-off bins where they do recycling there. So we went through that process. Consumers don't have to pay more, but the conversion and the recovery of that film at store drop-off is like microscopic, because that's a huge behavior change to ask people to save that and then take it back to the store to recycle it. So that's one path that we did that was kind of easy, but we don't see consumers changing their behavior. So now we're looking at, okay, well, how do you decrease the behavior change and maybe look into packaging that is curbside recyclable? But then we see right now, at least, that the cost of that kind of packaging would be 2 to 4x the cost of our current packaging. So at that point, you'd be asking the consumer to pay a price premium. So that's the trade-offs that we're trying to manage, is like the balance between the price premium and the behavior time premium, and how to find that sweet spot to get past that early adopter consumer set and really more into the mass market.
Fantastic. So thank you for sharing. It looks like the key, and as a marketing professor, I have a time to kind of say, hey, segmentation, right? Start off with the innovation. Maybe if you have to pass your costs on for having a price premium, but do the right thing and have that segment of the population that values sustainability. at least start off. And as we start building scale, prices will drop and kind of continue to work through that effort through various channel partners as collaborators to make this happen, where more and more people can afford sustainable products that can't only afford it, but it's more accessible to them at various channels. So thank you for that. I'm going to, we're coming close to our Q&A time, but I want to ask one last question to all our panelists here before we jump into some of the questions that have come through the chat. If I'm a manager today, starting to think about how do I start? What is my role, right? And we're talking about Walmart's role and Whole Foods' role as a company role, but as an individual at a company at various different levels. How did they start thinking about these efforts, and how do they get some momentum around them? Ashley, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think it builds off of what Kim said about behavioral change as being the first element, right? When we talk about purpose as a precursor to thinking about how you're going to approach ESG sustainability, we always talk about purpose comes from who you are at your very, very best. Imagine a Venn diagram in your head, right? Who you are at your very best and the role in the world you're meant to play. And the intersection of those things is the articulation of your purpose. Once you know that, you know what you bring to the table. And so if you do that and you think about what am I really good at doing as a company, right? Because you can't do everything. As Pete was saying earlier, there's so many different metrics and so many different sustainability goals. You could go down the list and it would be exhausting. Maybe think about what are your core competencies. So when you look at the gamut of all the things you could do, let's choose a few where people would say, that makes complete sense. Why they would go after that, because it's authentic and you'll be good at it. Okay, you've put the strategy in place, but now you need to make the incremental change. What does that mean? Leaders have to live it. They have to have a story about it. They have to demonstrate it. It's the same thing we do in our personal lives. Like we were joking earlier, because I was drinking a lot of coffee before this today, that, my kids wanted us to be more sustainable in our coffee preparation in our homes in the morning. So we have made that change, but it means that my coffee takes longer to make. And that's a behavioral change that was tough for me in the mornings, because it's like I'm up late nights. I'm lucky that I do a lot of work all over the world. So the mornings are hard for me. And that extra 5 minutes it takes to brew seemed like forever. But you know what? I've adjusted, right? I put the coffee on. I take my sweet mutt dog for a walk up and down the block. I come back, the coffee's ready. But I had to really mentally change how that functions. It's a small, tiny thing, right? So start making change, but be cognizant of the behavior is going to be important. And getting over that hurdle, I think, will help people. So do it authentically and do it in an empathetic human way. And you will see, it'll feel good and it will feel natural. So that's what I would say.
Kim, do you want to jump in?
I'll tell you that a lot of the efforts that we've made at GP, at least from a consumer standpoint for our consumer facing stuff, have actually been fairly bottoms up. So, when you ask what an individual can do, an individual is what starts a movement. And so, Pete mentioned Quilted Northern, where we've launched some sustainable benefits. You know of a Brawny product that's coming to market soon that will have some new benefits that I'm excited about. And those were not like top-down corporate initiatives. Those were really our employees raising their hands and saying, hey, I'm not really satisfied with what we're doing today. And then we took a moment to listen to our consumers too. And we made the business case and of how not only would it be, like we've been saying, the right thing to do, but a first step on the journey of doing the right thing, but also beneficial for the business, beneficial for our retail partners, beneficial for our employees so that they feel like they're part of something with purpose, like Ashley mentioned. So I do think it's possible for you as an individual, if you see an opportunity, if there's a way that you can articulate the value that it creates for society and your company, then it becomes a win-win that that is much easier to get, at least from my perspective, like my corporate partners rallied behind and supportive of. So that's the path that we took on my team. And so, you know, we're making some first steps now, and I'm pretty excited about what we've been able to do, just kind of bubbling up from the bottom.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. Pete, did you want to add anything here? Should we move on to some of the Q&A questions that have popped into chat?
We can move on. I was
Okay.
going to reiterate things. So,
all right, great. So jumping on to some of the questions here that have come in the last hour, there were some that had a continuing theme to what we're talking about on Green Premium. So I'll start with that. This question is from William Fuller. Thank you for that question, William, and thank you for joining us today. His question is, excellent point regarding affordability of doing the right thing. How do we put the masses who cannot afford it into the demand drivers? Why should a company attempt to engage customers who have no or very limited means to be consumers of our products and social viewpoints?
I could take an initial stab at that.
Okay.
And then would love help. I think we have found through measuring many of the kind of more qualitative benefits with clients that inherently, like almost every customer wants to do the right thing. When you survey them, they say they do. It's whether they will pay more or go out of their way to do it. I think a great example is recycling. 20 years ago, almost no one recycled because you had to, rinse stuff out, save it, put it in your trunk, drive to a recycling center. Today, depending on where you are, like upwards of 90% of people recycle because all you have to do is take a few extra steps to a different colored bin or, rinse something out and put it in a separate bin in your house. And so I think if we make it easy, they will come, like Field of Dreams. And so when you launch and communicate the right sustainability plan that's authentic, that's backed up with, tactics and details, maybe authenticated or audited by a third party, and you measure like Net Promoter Score and the impact on loyalty, we see double-digit increases in Net Promoter Score kind of across the board. And so, most consumers want to do the right thing if you make it easy enough to do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ashley, Kim, did you want to jump in with any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just to the last question of the last part of the question, which I think is like, why should a company try to engage the masses that may not have the means? It's exactly what Pete said. It's about preference and loyalty. So we have some products that are targeted to, well, what I'll say is they're a value-based product. So they're not premium performance. They get the job done, but with just right quality, and the price is low. Like, that's the promise. You're not going to get a premium product, but the price is low. And so when we talk to those consumers, even though they say, like you said, they're not willing to pay a premium, they recognize that they would prefer a product that has lower environmental impact or sustainability benefits or other types of social benefits. So it still drives preference, which then drives loyalty, and that has value to me in capturing those consumers. So if I can find ways to add benefits without adding substantial costs, I still want to go do that to try to drive the preference with that consumer.
And just because they can't afford it doesn't mean they don't aspire to, and not necessarily that lifestyle, but aspire to that product or find value in that brand, find loyalty in that brand. And a lot of times when you have a product that plays a role in that way, the sense of leadership of how they're putting that out there to show and to move the market, to show people that this is important, to demonstrate it from a storytelling point of view, I think that can be really powerful. Right? There's a lot of companies out there that do great things that, not all of us can afford to participate in, but it's good to see them taking that leadership stance because it's supposed to be a collective, right? So it's not just the affordable products that should be doing it. It should be all of these products to move the whole thing forward.
What great ideas. It makes me think about one of the class sessions I have, an academic that I am, I'm bringing that up. We do a case on Unilever launching in Brazil, and they're having the same sort of debate on whether they should go for these low-income consumers with a washing powder. And if you attended my class, you would know at the end, they do end up doing that. And it's been such a massive success for them. And this is the same debate that they were having, is it's a low-income consumer, but a lot of consumers have an upward mobility, you're building habit, you're doing the right thing. And people are seeing that. So it helps your overall brand as well. So fantastic ideas there. I think we have time for a couple more questions. And some of them we've answered through the panel, but I want to jump into this question on by Devin Daly. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Thank you for your question. The question is, beyond the carbon neutral environmental discussion, isn't there a human capital piece to ESG? And if so, how do you start to measure those aspects that is in the social and governance issues?
I can do a little bit there first and then hand it over. But yes, right? You've nailed it. That's the S and the G, which people often confuse. So they'll say ESG and think you mean environment, but it's a much broader sense. When you think about the social and the governance, that gets down to, on the social side, a lot of what is the societal or community uplift that you're going to find by doing this? Are there ways to look at sustainability from a community point of view? Right. And so there are companies who will look across climate, but they will also look across, what does this mean in the communities in which I have plants, or which I have particular presence, or which I have large penetration? What am I doing to ensure that that community is growing and thriving in ways that I can help contribute to authentically? There is that. Then there's also the governance piece, which is, how do we actually functionally make this work? And that aligns with another question I saw around, how does this work internationally? Like, every area of the world looks at how we think about ESG differently. Governance is one of those ones that sticks out, because if you're doing sustainability work in Asia Pacific versus Europe versus the States, you will see very different ways of checking the boxes and approaches to it. And so the governance you will often see come up in that way. So paying attention to what that means and how you can actually push through your goals, push through your metrics, make sure you're meeting the right regulatory pieces will be different in each of those places. And so I think that paying attention to the G part is, part of looking at the overall goals.
Fantastic. Thank you. Pete, Kim, did you want anything to share on this one? The next one, Kim, is for you or for any other speaker. It's Karmeshra Gorman. I will not try to pronounce that. So to what degree does Georgia Pacific or other well-established brands feel some responsibility to be the environmental leader, changing consumer behavior as opposed to following the trends and addressing policy change? I'm a consumer who prefers purchasing bamboo toilet paper, by the way. Good for you, Carmen. Kim, do you want to add to this discussion?
Yes. Hold on, I lost my Zoom window. Okay. So I think the answer is yes. We at least at Georgia Pacific feel some responsibility to be a leader and to drive the change versus just being reactive to the change. And I think we've tried to be thoughtful about where it makes sense most to do that versus tackle, total universe of environment and sustainability. So one area that we try to be a leader in is sustainable forestry practices, because obviously our products are dependent on the health of our forests. So as we use those natural resources, how do we ensure that we have sustainable processes that are beneficial for the environment, and also, like Ashley said, the communities that we source from, because that is also a very important factor for forestry as well. So that's one where we do quite a bit of leadership in partnership with trade organizations and industry councils like the AF&PA. We do many leadership initiatives around driving certification of forests, and making sure that it becomes industry standard basically to source from certified forests. And so one example is we all of our products are 100% sourced from certified forests today. And we have that certification on the back of the pack. We're actually partnering with one of our largest customers to actually move that certification to the front of the package, which seems like a small thing, but it's again part of leadership of driving the awareness with the consumer that there is such a thing as a certified forest and why it matters. And we care so much that we're going to take up real estate on the front of our pack to talk to the consumer about that. So there are various things like that. But again, we try to be choiceful in the areas that we pick to really think about and drive that leadership to the places that we have capability and maybe where we have advantage in being the leader.
Okay. Can I add one thought to that? And I agree with everything you said, Kim. I think it really depends on your product and industry and what your peer set is doing. And as you kind of analyze that internally, I think there's a huge first mover advantage. And so if you analyze that for your company or product and you see that, hey, the stakeholders and customers might care about us addressing this and your peer set is not doing it, I would jump in with both feet and take that first mover advantage. There was an airline that had the first loyalty program, first frequent flyer mile program, and it was a competitive advantage when they first launched it. And now it's table stakes and everyone has one. And we're headed the same place with sustainability and addressing ESG.
Fantastic. So on that note, I see Pam's joined us. So it's our time together this morning is coming to an end. I want to check with the panelists if they have any last words. If not, we will get to your questions separately. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any further conversations or would like to have further conversations on that. But thank you for joining us today.
And thank you, Saloni. Any last words from our panelists this morning?
No, just thanks for having us.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate especially your stories and insights, which really help these ideas come to life and practical ways in which companies can think differently about what they're doing, addressing the market. So as we conclude today, we also want to thank you, our participants, for joining us. And as always, we would love to share a few things that are upcoming for us. So Justin, if you could share a screen or enable me to share screen. We have a few short courses that it is not too late to register for coming up next week. We have our, I want to tell you first about our next series, in the series for ESG, forgot about that. Coming up in 2 weeks is our final ESG series session, and we will be discussing B Corp. So good for business, good for the world, hosted by our own Brian Goebel. And then coming up in 2022, and I can't believe it's already December. I've heard so many people exclaim that, but we will have a welcome back to Professor Tom Smith to a revisit or an update, if you will, on the economy and me, as well as some new faces here on Business Over Breakfast. So we hope you'll continue to join us in 2022. And then again, we do have some short courses that are coming up, executive decision making coming up next week, not too late to register for that. And then in the new year, we are looking forward to courses like data visualization, our managerial leadership program, and also our growth marketing certificate is launching. So those are 4 credit courses for growth marketing certificate. We're also having a number of 4 credit courses that you can find more information on our website. So just Google executive education short courses and you can peruse through those. As always, we thank you for joining us and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Panelists, thank you so much again. And I encourage all of you to complete our short survey. We'd love to know what your key takeaways were for today's session. So enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.